For 12 long years, my father and his wife treated me like a ghost. Then, facing utter financial ruin, they appeared on my doorstep demanding I sell my childhood home. They thought I was still their powerless little girl. They had forgotten one thing. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence of my 30th birthday was a comfortable one, a silence I had built for myself. It was woven from the gentle hum of my computer, the soft scratch of my pencil on a sketchpad, and the quiet satisfaction of a business that was finally, unequivocally, mine. I had spent the day working, not out of necessity, but out of love for what I did. I was a graphic designer, a brand consultant, and after a decade of relentless effort, I was successful. My apartment, a sun-drenched space in the heart of the city, was a testament to that success. It was a home I had earned, a sanctuary I had curated. But as evening fell, another kind of silence began to creep in. The celebratory quiet morphed into a hollow echo of what was missing. 30. It was a milestone, a number that felt solid and significant. It was a day my mother would have filled with laughter, terrible singing, and a lopsided, homemade cake. It was a day I always imagined my father would be there for. I pushed the thought away, as I had learned to do so many times over the last 12 years. I walked into my small kitchen and poured myself a glass of expensive champagne, a gift from a satisfied client. I raised the glass to an imaginary audience. "To choosing yourself," I whispered, the words tasting both triumphant and a little lonely. Just as the first cold, crisp bubble popped on my tongue, the doorbell rang. The sound was so jarring, so alien in my carefully controlled environment that I nearly dropped the glass. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends knew I preferred to keep my birthdays low-key, and any deliveries would have come during the day. I set the flute down on the polished granite countertop, my heart thumping a nervous, unfamiliar rhythm. I padded to the door, peering through the peephole, and the world tilted. On my doorstep, bathed in the sterile, fluorescent light of the hallway, stood my father, Robert, and his wife, Delilah. They looked older, of course. My father's once dark hair was a distinguished silver, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. Delilah stood beside him, ramrod straight, her face a mask of practiced neutrality, her expensive-looking coat doing little to hide the tension in her shoulders. It had been 12 years. 12 years of unanswered phone calls, returned letters, and a silence so profound it had become a physical presence in my life. For a heartbeat, a foolish, childish hope surged through me. They remembered. They came for my birthday. The thought was so powerful it almost buckled my knees. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Clara," my father said. His voice was rough, as if he hadn't used it in a while. He shifted his weight, his eyes darting from my face to a point somewhere over my shoulder. He couldn't quite meet my gaze. Delilah, however, looked directly at me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, darling, you look well." It wasn't a compliment, it was an assessment, an appraisal. I stood there, gripping the edge of the door, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and old, familiar pain. The hope that had flared just moments before died as quickly as it had come. I saw it then, in the pinched look around my father's mouth and the predatory stillness in Delilah's posture. This wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a birthday visit. This was a transaction. 12 years of silence, and they hadn't come to wish me a happy birthday. They had come to take something from me. The betrayal was worse than the silence had ever been. "Can we come in?" Delilah asked, her tone smooth and coated in a thin veneer of politeness that barely concealed the impatience beneath. My own home, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like it was under siege. Every instinct screamed at me to close the door and lock it, to retreat back into the peaceful quiet they had just shattered. But the shock held me paralyzed. I found myself stepping back, muttering a faint, "of course," and gesturing them inside. They walked past me into the living room, their presence immediately sucking the air out of the space. My father looked around, a flicker of something, was it surprise? Pride. In his eyes as he took in my clean, modern furniture and the framed prints of my design work on the walls. He looked like a stranger visiting a museum. Delilah, on the other hand, swept her gaze across the room with the critical eye of an auctioneer evaluating an estate sale. "This is nice, Clara," she said, running a manicured finger along the spine of a book on my coffee table. "Very minimalist." I closed the door, the soft click echoing the finality of my broken piece. "What are you doing here?" I asked. The words came out colder than I intended, but I was too numb to soften them. My father flinched and finally looked at me. "Clara, it's been a long time. We just wanted to see you, to reconnect." The lie was so bald-faced, so insulting, that a humorless laugh almost escaped me. Reconnect. After more than a decade of treating me like I didn't exist, I remembered my 18th birthday, waiting by the phone for a call that never came. My college graduation, where the empty seat next to my friends was a gaping wound. The day I launched my own business, desperate to share the news with the one person whose approval I craved, only to have my email bounce back, blocked. "You wanted to reconnect?" I repeated, my voice flat. "After 12 years, on my 30th birthday." My father's face crumpled slightly. "It's your birthday. Oh, Clara, I didn't realize." But Delilah was already moving on, her mission overriding any pretense of sentimentality. "Well, what a lovely coincidence," she chirped, her smile widening. "Happy birthday, darling. See, Robert." It was meant to be. We're here on a special day. She sat on the edge of my sofa, arranging the folds of her coat around her. She looked utterly out of place. "Actually, Clara, your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking about the future, about assets, and making smart financial decisions for our retirement." The word assets hung in the air, heavy and loaded. I stayed standing, crossing my arms over my chest. It was a defensive posture, a barrier against them. "The market is very favorable right now," Delilah continued, her voice taking on a businesslike clip. "Particularly for legacy properties. We've had the old house appraised. The value is quite extraordinary." The old house, my childhood home. The house my mother had filled with light and love, the house where every corner held a memory of her. The garden she planted, the window seat where she taught me to read, the kitchen that always smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. They were talking about it as if it were a stock certificate. And I prompted, my jaw tight. "And it's time to sell," she said simply, looking at me as if this were the most obvious conclusion in the world. "It's a huge, empty house just sitting there. It's a wasted resource. Selling it would secure our future, Robert's future. It's the logical thing to do." I looked at my father, who was now staring intently at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. He was letting her do all the talking, just as he had always let her. He had abdicated his role as a father, and now he was abdicating his role in this conversation. I felt a surge of cold, clear anger that burned away the last wisps of shock. They had come here to inform me, not to ask me. They had assumed my compliance. They had assumed I was still the heartbroken girl they had abandoned, desperate for any scrap of their attention. Delilah was talking about my mother's house as if it were just a pile of bricks and mortar, a line item on a balance sheet. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. "So you came here, after 12 years of silence, to tell me you're selling my mother's house," I stated, my voice dangerously calm. Delilah's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Well, it's your father's house, technically. And it's what's best for the family." The family? The words were a bitter pill. For 12 years, the family had consisted of the two of them. I was a footnote, a ghost from a previous life. Now, when they needed something, they were trying to resurrect me, to pull me back into a family that only existed when it was convenient for them. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch, watching the confidence in her eyes begin to curdle into uncertainty. They had made a grave miscalculation. The 12 years of silence had not begun with a bang, but with a slow, creeping fade. After my mother died when I was 15, my father and I had clung to each other, two survivors on a lifeboat. We were a team. He was my rock, my hero, the only parent I had left. Then, 2 years later, Delilah entered the picture. She was polished and poised, the owner of a chic, overpriced boutique downtown. She smelled of expensive perfume and faint disapproval. From the very beginning, she treated me not as a daughter to be welcomed, but as a complication to be managed. My presence was an untidy reminder of my father's first life, his real love. I was the living legacy of the woman she could never truly replace, and she resented me for it. I tried. I truly did. I was 18 and desperate to keep my father. I complimented Delilah's impeccable taste. I asked about her day. I bought her thoughtful Christmas gifts that were received with a cool, dismissive smile. I tried to shrink myself, to take up less space in my own home, hoping it would appease her, but nothing worked. Every family dinner became a minefield. Delilah would make subtle, cutting remarks about my mother's dated decor or my impractical dream of being an artist. She'd sigh dramatically whenever I brought up a happy memory that didn't include her. My father, lost in his new romance, was blind to it all. "You're not giving her a chance, Clara," he'd say, a frustrated edge to his voice. "She's trying so hard." The final break came during the summer before I left for college. Delilah had hosted a small dinner party for her friends, a group of people who looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. I had spent the evening feeling like a ghost at the feast. Later, after the guests had left, Delilah accused me of being sullen and rude, of embarrassing her in front of her friends. "She feels like you resent our happiness, Clara," my father said, standing beside Delilah, who was dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "That's not true." I cried, my voice cracking with desperation. "I just miss how things used to be. I miss you." "That's not fair to Delilah," he shot back, his face hardening. "This is our life now, you need to accept that." Delilah's mask of sorrow was perfect. "I just want us all to be a family, Robert," she murmured, leaning into his side. "But if she can't respect our marriage," she let the sentence hang in the air, a perfectly crafted ultimatum. And my father chose. He told me that perhaps it was best if I packed my things for college a little early. He didn't help. He didn't even say goodbye when I left. Delilah stood in the doorway, a look of quiet triumph on her face. That was the last time I had seen either of them in person, until tonight. Now, standing in my living room, Delilah's polished facade was exactly the same. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup immaculate. Her profession had become vague over the years. The boutique had closed, and she now referred to herself as a lifestyle consultant, a title as hollow and meaningless as her compliments. She was a woman who had built her identity on the foundation of my father's wealth and social standing. "It's a practical decision, Clara," she was saying now, her voice regaining its confident, patronizing rhythm. "Your father has worked hard his whole life. He deserves a comfortable, stress-free retirement." The implication was clear. I, and my sentimental attachment to a house, was the obstacle to his comfort. She had always been skilled at framing me as the problem. She had an inappropriate, almost obsessive interest in the financial aspects of my father's past. I remembered her, years ago, asking pointed questions about my mother's will, about the ownership of the house, about what exactly my father had set aside for me. At the time, I thought it was just nosiness. Now I saw it for what it was, a long-term strategy. She was a prospector, and she had been mapping out her claim for over a decade, but her map was old and the landscape had changed. After they left, the silence that rushed back in was different. It was no longer peaceful. It was charged, electric with the residue of their presence. I walked back to the kitchen and looked at the champagne flute, the tiny bubbles still valiantly rising to the surface. My birthday toast, to choosing yourself. The words echoed in my mind, no longer a lonely whisper but a call to arms. For 12 years, I had mourned a father who was still alive. I had ached for a family that had amputated me from its body. Tonight, they hadn't come to welcome me back, they had come to pick my bones. The shock had worn off, replaced by a glacial calm resolve. The hurt was still there, a deep, familiar ache in my chest, but for the first time it was secondary to a burgeoning sense of indignation. They had underestimated me. They saw the heartbroken 18-year-old girl they had cast aside, not the self-sufficient 30-year-old woman I had become. They saw me as an emotional, sentimental obstacle, not a strategic, independent adult. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name, Arthur Evans-esque. Mr. Evans was a corporate lawyer I had hired a few years ago to help me incorporate my business. He was sharp, no nonsense, and meticulously thorough. He was exactly the person I needed. He picked up on the third ring, his voice crisp even after hours. "Clara, is everything all right with the portfolio?" "Everything's fine with the business, Arthur," I said, my voice even. "I have a personal matter. It's about a real estate trust." I explained the situation in concise, unemotional terms. I told him about the house, my father's remarriage, and his sudden reappearance with the intention to sell. As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were describing a plot in a novel. "An irrevocable trust, you said?" Arthur asked, a new note of interest in his voice. "Established when you were a minor?" "Yes, I was probably around 10 years old. My mother was still alive. It was her idea. She wanted to make sure the house, her house, was safe." I could almost hear her voice, a gentle but firm murmur in the back of my memory. "This place holds our family's heart, Robert. It must always be for Clara." "And do you recall the exact terms?" Arthur pressed. "Specifically, the triggering event for the transfer of ownership." My breath caught. My father told me once, a long time ago, that it would be mine someday. He said something about a milestone birthday. He might have said 30. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. "Clara, this is potentially very significant. An irrevocable trust is a fortress. If it was structured as you suspect, your father has had no legal right to sell, mortgage, or otherwise dispose of that property for years. He's been a trustee, not an owner." "That's what I thought," I said, a surge of adrenaline sharpening my senses. "But they came here tonight acting as if it was a done deal. They have had it appraised. They are ready to list it." "They can have it appraised 100 times," Arthur said, his tone dismissive. "It doesn't change the legal reality. I need the trust documents. Do you know which law firm drafted the original deed and trust?" I gave him the name of the old family law firm my parents had used for everything. It felt like dredging up a name from another lifetime. "Good, I know them," Arthur said. "I'll make some inquiries first thing in the morning. I'll need a signed authorization from you to act on your behalf. I'll email you the form now. Sign it and send it back tonight. In the meantime, Clara, do not engage with them. Do not agree to anything, do not deny anything. Be a black hole. Let them talk, but give them nothing." After we hung up, I felt as if a steel rod had been fused to my spine. The passive victim was gone. In her place was a strategist. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about 12 years of calculated emotional cruelty. This was about Delilah's greed and my father's weakness. The clever trap wasn't something I had set. It was something my mother, with her incredible foresight, had set for me. A final gift, a suit of armor delivered across time. All I had to do was put it on. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face, and waited for Arthur's email. I was no longer a ghost to be ignored. I was a legal reality they could not erase. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in the art of being a black hole. My phone lit up with a series of texts, first from my father, then from Delilah. "Dad, Clara, we need to talk about the house. Please call me." "Delilah, Clara, your father is very upset. You were quite rude last night. We are trying to do what is best for everyone, and a little cooperation would be appreciated. Dad, I don't understand why you're being like this. It's just a house." "Delilah, a realtor is coming on Friday. We expect you to be reasonable. Ignoring us will not make this go away." I read each message, my expression unreadable, and set the phone back down. With each text, their shared narrative became clearer. I was being difficult, emotional, and obstructive. They were the rational adults, and I was the petulant child standing in the way of progress. On the second day, Arthur called. "I have it," he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "The trust is exactly as you suspected. It's airtight. The Clara M. Davison Irrevocable Trust. The property was legally transferred to the trust 30 years ago. Your father was named the trustee, with a fiduciary duty to maintain the property on your behalf. And the triggering event for the dissolution of the trust and the full transfer of title to you, the sole beneficiary, was the date of your 30th birthday." He let that sink in. "So, as of 2 days ago," Arthur continued, You are the sole, unencumbered owner of that property. Your father has no more legal say over it than I do. Congratulations, Clara. It's a beautiful, brilliant piece of estate planning. Your mother was a very smart woman. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, Arthur. Can you send me the documents? Already in your inbox, he replied. Now, how do you want to play this? That evening, I decided to break my silence. I didn't call back. I sent a short, simple text message to my father. The sale of the house is more complicated than you think. We need to discuss this in person before you involve any realtors. The response was almost instantaneous. It was from Delilah, using my father's phone. Delilah, there is nothing complicated about it, Clara. Your father owns the house. Stop being dramatic. I took a breath. This was it. The first strategic reveal. That is not legally accurate. I have the trust documents in front of me. You need to see them. The 3 dots indicating that she was typing appeared, disappeared, and reappeared several times. I could picture her perfectly manicured fingers stabbing at the screen, her composure beginning to fray. Finally, a new message popped up. Delilah, what documents? What are you talking about? Your father would have told me about any trust. You're making this up to be difficult. It was a poorly executed lie, and we both knew it. Her frantic denial was a confession. She had known, or at least suspected, that some legal instrument was in place, and had simply hoped to bully her way past it, assuming I was ignorant of its power. Let me speak to my father, I texted back, refusing to engage with her directly. The phone rang a moment later. It was my father, but Delilah was on speaker, her sharp voice cutting in before he could even say hello. What is this nonsense, Clara? She snapped, all pretense of warmth gone. Her voice was shrill. What documents are you talking about? Are you trying to blackmail us? After everything your father has done for you. Everything he has done for me. I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. The injustice of that statement was like a slap in the face. He hasn't spoken to me in 12 years. We are talking about now. She shrieked. We are talking about his future, his security. He needs to sell that house and you are standing in the way. You are selfish. And there it was. The mask had not just slipped. She had ripped it off and thrown it to the ground. In her panic, her true colors were on full display, grasping, desperate, and utterly contemptuous of me. Put the realtor on hold, Delilah, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. You are not selling my house. I hung up the phone. The silence that followed was, for the first time in years, truly peaceful. It was the sound of my own power, reclaimed. Delilah's desperation manifested as a campaign of escalating harassment. She left a string of increasingly unhinged voicemails, alternating between veiled threats about family loyalty and saccharine appeals to my better nature. She even had the audacity to show up at the house with a realtor, only to be politely informed by the long-term caretaker, a man loyal to my mother's memory, that they were not permitted on the property without my express consent. The realtor, sensing a legal quagmire, backed away quickly. Meanwhile, Arthur wasn't just resting on the victory of the trust. A woman this desperate has a history, he had said to me. Let's find out what it is. He initiated a thorough background check on Delilah, digging into her financial and personal history. He believed her panic was disproportionate. It wasn't just about losing a potential windfall, it was about something more. 2 days later, Arthur called me with the results. Clara, you're not going to believe this, he began. Delilah's real name is Deborah. She changed it legally 15 years ago. And before she met your father, she was married to a man in Arizona, a wealthy widower who was about 20 years her senior. He died of a sudden heart attack just 2 years into their marriage. My God, I whispered. It gets worse, Arthur said. The man's children from his first marriage contested the will. They claimed Deborah had systematically isolated him from them and coerced him into signing over all his assets to her just months before he died. They lost the case due to a lack of concrete evidence, and she walked away with everything. She cashed it all out, moved to this state, changed her name to Delilah, and a year later, she met your father. The pattern was chillingly identical. A wealthy, grieving widower, a new wife who isolates him from his children, a swift and total transfer of assets. My father was simply the second act in her long-running play. All her talk of lifestyle consulting was a cover for her real profession. She was a predator. That evening, I got the call I had been dreading and expecting. It was my father, and this time he was alone. "Clara," he said, his voice small and weary. I don't know what's going on. Delilah is a wreck. She keeps talking about lawyers and trusts. What did you do?" The question, the implication that I was the aggressor, sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "What did I do?" I asked, my voice tight. "I grew up, Dad. I turned 30. I did exactly what you and Mom planned for me to do all those years ago." "I don't remember the details," he said, sounding defensive. "It was so long ago. Your mother handled all of that, but Clara, please, you have to understand, we're in trouble. The money, it's gone. Delilah made some bad investments. We need this. I'm asking you, as your father, to help me." He was still struggling, caught in the web she had spun around him for over a decade. He was defending her, pleading for her, even as their shared financial ruin loomed. His loyalty was still to her, the architect of his isolation and his impending poverty. The last remnants of my girlish hope, the part of me that thought he might see the light on his own, finally died. He wouldn't see it. I would have to show him. "I have the documents from the trust, Dad," I said, my voice firm but devoid of the anger I felt. "And I have some other documents you need to see as well. They're about Delilah, about her past. Meet me tomorrow at the old house. 1 o'clock. Come alone." I scheduled the second, more powerful confrontation on my own turf. The place where it all began and where it would all end. I would not just present him with the legal document proving my ownership. I would present him with the irrefutable proof of the kind of woman he had sacrificed his daughter for. The spell had to be broken, and I was the only one with the power to do it. The old house felt like a time capsule. I arrived an hour early, letting myself in with the key the caretaker had left for me. The air was thick with the scent of lemon polish and memories. Everything was just as I remembered it, meticulously maintained but frozen in time. Sunbeams slanted through the large bay window in the living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I ran my hand along the back of the floral sofa, my mother's favorite, and looked at the gallery wall of family photos. There I was, a gap-toothed 7-year-old on my father's shoulders. There was my mother, her smile radiant, holding me as a baby. The last photo in the sequence was of my father and me at my mother's funeral, 2 broken figures clinging to each other. There were no photos that included Delilah. This house had refused to accept her presence. I laid out the documents on the heavy oak dining table. On one side, I placed the thick, ribbon-bound legal trust, its pages crisp and official. On the other side, I placed a much thinner folder. It contained a printout of the court filings from Arizona and a copy of Delilah's former marriage certificate. At exactly 1 o'clock, I saw my father's car pull into the driveway, but he wasn't alone. Delilah was in the passenger seat, her face set like stone. A cold fury settled in my stomach. He couldn't even honor this one simple request. He was still her puppet. They walked up the path together, my father looking haggard and lost, Delilah looking like a general marching into battle. She had clearly convinced him this was a united front, a final push to make the unruly child see reason. They thought they were coming for a negotiation. They had no idea they were walking into a final judgment. I opened the door before they could knock. "I said to come alone, Dad." "She insisted," he mumbled, not looking at me. "We're a team, Clara. We handle these things together." "Fine," I said, stepping back. "Then you can handle this together." I led them to the dining room. Delilah's eyes immediately went to the documents on the table. A flicker of fear, quickly masked, crossed her face. "So," she began, forcing a brisk, businesslike tone, "you have some papers. Let's see what this is all about so we can get past this foolishness." I said nothing. I simply gestured to the trust document on the left. My father picked it up, his hands trembling slightly. He began to read, his brow furrowing as he scanned the dense legal text. He flipped through the pages, his confusion slowly morphing into a dawning, horrified understanding. This says it's in your name, he whispered, looking up at me, his face pale. Sole ownership, as of your 30th birthday. That's right, I said calmly. Mom set it up 30 years ago to protect this house. To protect me, it's not your asset to sell. It hasn't been for a very long time. It's mine. Delilah scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. That can't be right, it's a mistake. We can fight this in court. Robert, he wouldn't have just given away his biggest asset. He did, I replied, my gaze unwavering. Because he was a different man then, a man who loved his wife and wanted to honor her wishes. This is ridiculous. Delilah's voice rose, cracking with panic. We need that money. Robert needs it. You are being unbelievably selfish, hoarding this huge house for yourself when your own father is facing ruin. My father was still staring at the document, the truth of it sinking in like a stone. He looked from the page to me, then to Delilah, his expression bewildered. She's right, Delilah, he said, his voice faint. I remember now. Marie, she made me promise. Delilah spun on him, her eyes blazing with fury. You fool, you sentimental old fool. You let that woman rule you from the grave, while I am here trying to save us. And in that moment, seeing her mask of a loving wife crumble into pure, vitriolic greed, something in my father finally broke. He saw her. For the first time in 12 years, he truly saw the woman standing next to him. But that's not all, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I pushed the second, thinner folder across the table toward him. You should probably see this, too. He opened it numbly. He read the name on the marriage certificate, Deborah Ann Jenkins and Arthur Pendleton. He looked at the date. Then he looked at the court filing, the complaint lodged by the Pendleton children, detailing how Deborah had isolated their father and drained his finances before his untimely death. Who is Deborah? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Delilah went absolutely still. The color drained from her face. She looked like a cornered animal. Ask your wife, I said quietly. Ask her about her first husband, the other wealthy widower she married right before she met you. My father looked at Delilah, a lifetime of questions in his eyes. He held up the papers. Delilah, who is Deborah? She didn't answer. She just stared at me, her face a contortion of hatred. You, she spat. You little brat, you were always the problem. I should have gotten rid of you completely. It was a full confession. She wasn't just admitting to her past. She was admitting to her 12-year campaign against me. My father made a small, choked sound. He dropped the papers onto the table as if they had burned him. He looked at the woman he had given up his daughter for, the woman who had spent his fortune, the woman who was now looking at him with nothing but contempt because the money was gone. The spell, woven over 12 long years, shattered into a million pieces. He took a step back from her, then another. He looked around the room at the photos of the life he'd had, the family he'd lost. And then he looked at me, his eyes filled with a shame so profound it was almost unbearable to witness. Delilah, realizing the game was over, snatched her purse from the chair. Fine, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. Stay here and rot in your precious museum. I'm done. I'm done with both of you. She turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that a photo on the wall rattled. We heard her car start, tires screeching on the gravel as she sped away. My father stood alone in the center of the room, a man utterly broken. He sank into a dining chair and buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. The showdown was over. The antagonist was gone, and all that was left was the ruin she had left in her wake. In the silence that followed Delilah's exit, the only sound was my father's quiet grief. I didn't rush to comfort him. I let him sit with the weight of his choices, with the crushing realization of his 12-year folly. This was a reckoning that couldn't be softened or hurried. He had chosen his path, and this was its desolate end. After several long minutes, he lifted his head. His face was ravaged by shame and regret. She took everything, didn't she? He asked, his voice hoarse. It looks that way, I said, my tone neutral, not accusatory. The battle was won, there was no need for further blows. The investments she made, they were all in her name. The accounts were slowly drained. I trusted her completely, he said, more to himself than to me. I was a fool. It was the first truly honest thing he had said to me in over a decade. Arthur had already advised me that pursuing Delilah legally would be a long, expensive, and likely fruitless battle. She was a professional. She had covered her tracks, moving the money through a complex web of accounts that would be a nightmare to untangle. Her punishment would not be a legal one. Her punishment was that her source of income had dried up. She had abandoned my father the moment she realized he had nothing left for her to take. That, in itself, was a form of justice. "What will you do?" I asked. He shook his head, looking lost. "I don't know. I have my pension, but it's not much. The condo we were renting, I can't afford it alone. I have nothing." This was the moment. The moment where the old Clara would have swept in, offered him a room, promised to take care of him, and resumed her role as the dutiful daughter. But I was not the old Clara. I had chosen myself, and I would not unchoose myself now. "You have your pension," I stated calmly. "You're an architect. You can still consult. You have options. You'll have to figure it out." The words were hard, but they were necessary. Forgiveness was one thing, erasing the consequences of his actions was another. He needed to rebuild his life on his own, just as I had been forced to. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Clara, I am so sorry for everything, for choosing her over you, for not being there. For every birthday I missed, I was wrong. So terribly, terribly wrong." The apology was real. I could see it, feel it. And a part of my heart, a part I thought had turned to stone, began to soften. "I know," I said. I walked over to the gallery wall and straightened the photo that Delilah's exit had knocked askew. It was the one of me and my dad, right after my mom was gone, 2 survivors. "I'm not selling the house. It was Mom's legacy and it's mine now. But you can stay here, for a while, until you get back on your feet." Relief washed over his face, so intense it was painful to see. "Thank you, Clara, thank you." "But there are conditions," I added, turning back to him, my voice firm. "We go to therapy, together. We talk about the last 12 years, all of it. And we build something new, not what we had because that's gone forever. Something different, something honest. It's on my terms, Dad, all of it." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes again. "Whatever you say, Clara, on your terms." The road to reconciliation would be long and difficult. The scars were deep. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. It wasn't the blind, desperate hope of a child, but the cautious, measured hope of an adult. I had my father back, not as the hero I once idolized, but as a flawed, humbled man who was finally ready to face the truth. And I had myself, stronger and more whole than ever before. I had chosen myself, and in doing so, I had finally found a peace that no one could ever take from me again.